Greetings, you gorgeous, glorious bastards. How's it going?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. You're my main. I told you that.
There's only one of me. You said bastards, plural. I didn't know what you were talking about. I'm very good.
You first.
I'm very good, my little bastardette. Yes, I'm very good.
Yes. See, it's all about the love. It's good to see your face. How are things over there in Ireland?
Not bad. The weather. I've been very busy keeping myself going. The weather's been changeable. A very interesting psychic weather report coming up tonight. There's been
Fantastic.
a lot of spooky stuff that's been going down lately here.
That's right.
I don't know if it's worldwide, but we'll find out in the comments of this show.
Yeah, it's rainy and cold out today too, so it's cozy weather time again. We keep getting a little bit of a hint of spring and then summer, and then it's gone again. So we're going like this, boing.
And the big news: you two are coming to the Mysterious Earth conference in September.
Yes, I was just about to say that. So, yep, we are locked and loaded. We got our tickets. We will be there, and I think we're all gonna hang out, see Neil, and see all of you people in the comments. Everybody, you people. Well, everybody who can make it, please come. We're gonna have a great time, and we want to meet as many of you as we can.
Yep, I'm sure we'll have a great time, and you'll get a glorious welcome.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Absolutely. This will be my first time going over to that side of the pond of the UK. I've been over to Germany and Austria before, but I've not been to the United Kingdom. So I'm really looking forward to that. Meeting you all at a pub someplace. I'm sure we're going to get a thread going in the groups about a pub that we can all meet up at that has enough space to contain all of us crazy folks.
But make it to the conference.
But absolutely make it to the Mysterious Earth conference. We'll put a link around so people can buy tickets. We'll put it in the description of this video once up on YouTube. But I hope everybody here in the United States is having a nice Memorial Day weekend with your friends and family. I know we certainly are here. And hello to everybody's tuning in live on Facebook today. We appreciate having you all here, and we appreciate all of you Patreon supporters. And without further adu, I'm going to turn this over to Timony for the first story in episode 45 of The Week in Strange.
45. Can you believe it? Okay. The Untold Story. Blue people inhabited Kentucky in 1950s. 6 generations after a French orphan named Martin Fugate settled on the banks of eastern Kentucky's troublesome creek with his redheaded American bride, his great-great-great-great-grandson was born in a modern hospital not far from where the creek still runs. The boy inherited his father's lankiness and his mother's slightly nasal way of speaking. What he got from Martin Fugate was dark blue skin. It was almost purple, his father recalls. Doctors were so astonished by the color of Benjamin Stacy's skin that they raced him by ambulance from the maternity ward to the hospital near Hazard to a medical clinic in Lexington. 2 days of tests produced no explanation for skin the color of a bruised plum. A transfusion was being prepared when Benjamin's grandmother spoke up. "Have you ever heard of the blue Fugates of Troublesome Creek?" she asked the doctors. "My grandmother Luna on my dad's side was a blue Fugate. It was real bad in her," Alva Stacy, the boy's father, explained. The doctors finally came to the conclusion that Benjamin's color was due to blood inherited from generations back. Benjamin lost his blue tint within a few weeks, and now he is about as normal looking as a 7-year-old boy as you could hope to find. His lips and fingernails still turn a shade of purple blue when he gets cold or angry, a quirk that so intrigued medical students after Benjamin's birth that they would crowd around the baby and try to make him cry. Benjamin was a pretty big item in the hospital, his mother says with a grin. Dark blue lips and fingernails are the only traces of Martin Fugate's legacy left in the boy, and the recessive gene that has shaded many of the Fugates and their kin blue for the past 162 years. They're known simply as the blue people in the hills and the hollows around Troublesome and Balls Creek. God damn it. Most lived to their 80s and 90s without serious illness associated with the skin discoloration. Blue balls. I fucking had to go there. For some, though, there was a pain not seen in lab tests. That was the pain of being blue in a world that is mostly shades of white to black. There were always speculation in the hollows about what made the blue people blue. Heart disease, a lung disorder, the possibility proposed by one old timer that their blood is just a little closer to their skin, but no one knew for sure, and doctors rarely paid visits to the remote creekside settlements where most of the blue Fugatis lived until well into the 1950s. By the time a young hematologist from the University of Kentucky came down to Troublesome Creek in the 1960s to cure the blue people, Martin Fugati's descendants had multiplied the recessive gene all over the Cumberland Plateau. Madison Cawein began hearing rumors about the blue people when he went to work at the University of Kentucky's Lexington Medical Clinic in 1960. I'm a hematologist, so something like this perks up my ears. Sipping on whiskey and whiskey sours and letting his mind slip back to the summer he spent tromping around the hills looking for blue people. Cawein would drive back and forth between Lexington and Hazard, an 8-hour ordeal before the tollway was built, and scour the hills looking for the blue people he heard rumors about. The American Heart Association had a clinic in Hazard, and it was there that Cawein met a great big nurse who offered to help. Her name was Ruth Pendergrass, and she had been trying to stir up medical interest in the blue people ever since a dark blue woman walked into the county health department one bitterly cold afternoon and asked for a blood test. She had been out in the cold and she was just blue, recalls Pendergrass, who is now 69 years old and retired from nursing. Her face and her fingernails were almost indigo blue. It was like it liked to scare me to death. She looked like she was having a heart attack. I just knew that patient was going to die right there in the health department, but she wasn't at all alarmed. She told me that her family was the Blue Combses who lived up on Balls Creek. She was a sister to one of the Fugati women about the same time. Another of the Blue Combses, named Luke, had taken his sick wife up to the clinic at Lexington. One look at Luke was enough to get those doctors down here in a hurry, says Pendergrass, who joined Cawein to look for more blue people. Trudging up and down the hollows, fending off the two mean dogs that everyone had in their front yard, the doctor and the nurse would spot someone at the top of a hill who looked blue and take off in wild pursuit. By the time they'd get to the top, the person would be gone. Finally, one day when the frustrated doctor was idling inside the Hazard Clinic, Patrick and Rachel Ritchie walked in. They were bluer than hell, Cawein said. Well, as you can imagine, I really examined them. After concluding that there was no evidence of heart disease, I said, aha. I started asking them questions. Do you have any relatives who are blue? Then I sat down and we began to chart the family. Cawein remembers the pain that showed on Ritchie's on Ritchie's brothers and sisters' faces. They were really embarrassed about being blue, he said. Patrick was all hunched down in the hall. Rachel was leaning against the wall. They wouldn't come into the waiting room. You could tell how much it bothered them to be blue. After ruling out heart and lung diseases, the doctor suspected methemoglobinemia, a rare hereditary blood disorder that results from excessive levels of methylhemoglobin in the blood. This hemoglobin, which is blue, is a non-functional form of the red hemoglobin that carries oxygen. It is the color of oxygen-depleted blood seen in the blue veins just below the skin. If the blue people did have this methemoglobinemia, the next step was to find out the cause. It can be brought on by several things: abnormal hemoglobin formation, an enzyme deficiency, and taking too much of certain drugs, including vitamin K, which is essential for blood clotting and is abundant in pork liver and vegetable oil. Cawein drew lots of blood from the Ritchies and hurried back to his lab. He tested first for abnormal hemoglobin, but the results were negative. Stumped, the doctor turned to the medical literature for a clue. He found references to this blue hemoglobin dating to the turn of the century, but it wasn't until he came across E.M. Scott's 1960 report in the Journal of Clinical Investigation that the answer began to emerge. Scott was a public health service doctor at the Arctic Health Research Center in Anchorage who had discovered hereditary blue hemoglobin among Alaskan Eskimos and Indians. It was caused, Scott speculated, by an absence of the enzyme diaphrase from their red blood cells. In normal people, hemoglobin is converted at a very slow rate. If this conversion continued, all the body's hemoglobin would eventually be rendered useless. Normally, diaphrase converts I'm so sick of that word, blue hemoglobin back to hemoglobin. Scott also concluded that the condition was inherited as a simple recessive trait. In other words, to get the disorder, a person would have to inherit two genes for it, one from each parent. Somebody with only one gene would not have the condition, but could pass the gene on to a child. I used to live in Louisville, Kentucky, and the first time I ever heard about these people, the blue people, I was working at a health food store, and there was an older gal there named Marilyn. I'll never forget her. She was so sweet, and she was from the old hollers there in Kentucky, and she would tell me the stories and the legends about these blue people, and I was so fascinated by it. And I remember this was 14 years ago, something like that. And ever since then, I've been really fascinated by it. So I was really excited when I found a story that I could actually bring to the Week in Strange and talk about it.
Well, just to prove that we're all magical and shit. It's unbelievable. Now, tell the viewers that I have no knowledge of these stories or what you're going to talk about.
Confirmed. Absolutely no knowledge.
That's part of the show. I don't want to know for that reason. Otherwise, I'll probably start putting a prospectus together for each story, and it will ruin the flow. I want to be totally surprised, right? Now, today I was working on something, and a metal thing I was working on, and after I scraped all the rust off and cleaned it down and primed it, I painted it in blue, right? Now, because it was blue, I started singing that awful song from the late 90s. Well, it's not awful. I kind of felt like it's kind of fun. I'm blue, right? That's the first time I sang that song, because I sing when I'm doing things. I sing when I'm happy. When I'm working on something and I'm happy, I sing songs. So I started singing because it was starting to look beautiful. I was going, I'm blue, right? Then I go online and I'm looking at YouTube, and the first video comes up has an ad for some product. And what song are they using? I'm blue, I haven't heard that song in probably nearly 20 years.
And then what do we open the show with?
And you open the story. Well, fuck me pink. Or sorry, fuck me blue. That's incredible.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, colloidal silver makes people go blue like that too. But you have to drink industrial quantities. Remember, there's a Papa Smurf looking guy. He was on Oprah once, and he drank he went that color, and it was from just drinking industrial levels of colloidal silver to fight off infections.
Isn't there also in the some of the Vedic scripture, isn't there talk of people who were blue too, and some of the artwork you see?
Yeah, divinity. The gods,
yeah.
divinity.
Oh, the gods were. I thought there were also humans that were depicted. Like there was other races on the planet that were depicted as blue, but I might just be getting that wrong. There was just Shiva no, Krishna.
Like in Christianity, they have a halo over your head.
Oh, okay, so they were blue. Okay,
but
all right.
I was going to say blue bloods among the elites, and that's probably all breeding,
Yeah, with copper in their blood, right, or something like that. With the rather than having a high iron content, them having a high copper content, and copper when it oxidizes or when it's non-oxidized turns blue, right, or something like that. Yeah. Oxidizes. Yeah, this is interesting. Oxidized. Yep. In Balls Creek.
When it turns blue, when it oxidizes in water, it turns green. That's why you see copper dome on buildings all over. When it oxidizes in blood, it turns purple.
Okay.
Purpley blue. Yeah, bluish purple. Yeah. Depending on the intensity of it.
Wow. Yeah, but that's just real interesting that these folks are there in that part of the country over here in the United States. That it seems like it's a little bit more rare of a thing nowadays. But I think this is fascinating.
I'm sure. No, I'm not putting the people down. This is how they had. These poor people had very little, options in their lives. So I'd say a few generations earlier, a couple of cousins got too close and had kids, and that probably kicked off the genetic aspects of it.
Yep,
it happens.
Daddy.
Yeah, no, but it could be just something completely harmless. They may not have known they were cousins. Like on island, for instance, like on island communities, they have not so much nowadays with people travel. In the old days, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the jobs of the wise woman was to keep genealogies, and you have that in groups like the Jews and stuff. With a matchmaker. The matchmaker's job in the village was to make sure, like in the Jewish tradition, that not only were they good couples, but they were not the wrong couple for the sake of what caused inbreeding.
Yeah.
So people have had great wisdom. It's just probably remote America, 200-300 years ago. Your cousins come back around again. You probably don't know. That kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be also interesting to totally go off into kind of conspiracy theory land, that in the future, if the needlecraft and all that does genetically mess up the people that took it enough to the point where some of them are sterilized, the people that didn't partake in the needlecraft, if there's, carrying on the genes of the human population, there'd probably be a little bit of that occurring again if the only fertile people are the ones that didn't take the needlecraft.
Oh, we won't talk too much on that, but to me, that was the thing. I was born human, I'm dying human. That's the end of it.
Yep.
And I'm not putting down people who took it for love
Right.
or for take care of their families. I'm not judging that way. I'm just saying, we all our different stories are all personal, but that was my main one. I'm not going to die of, a robot.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, a freak. Yeah. Not to say those people are. I'm just saying that's what drove my resistance.
Yeah, that's what I just mean. Like the gene manipulation that's been forced onto people. I won't say use too many of those words, but just the kind of infertility that it can cause inadvertently, causing an. And
I really do hope, and I really do wish, and I really do have a feeling that the ones who were needlecrafted and against their will, that they will use epigenetics or something like that will probably eventually wash that shit out of their system. So, don't think because for some reason you got that there's no hope. There's lots of hope. Lots of hope.
Especially because there's their first iteration of trying something like this. And whenever the first iteration of it occurs, there's always, it's always not as effective as they've done after they've done this for a number of times. So I'd imagine we
know how powerful epigenetics are. We know people have cured themselves through their minds of horrific diseases, and this is nowhere as bad as that. So, that's what I would say to those people: start hitting those epigenetics and acting like that shit isn't inside you.
Yeah.
I apologize for my shoddy reading. I think I really do need glasses at this point in my life. So I'm going to focus and make this a little bit bigger. Yeah. Okay. The psychic power of Padrepio, stigmata, bilocation, and levitation. Popular Catholic saint Padrepio is credited not only with miraculous healing, but a whole array of psychic power. Even as a child, Catholic saint Padrepio exhibited a psychic connection with the unseen world. He loved solitude and held conversations with invisible beings. He had visions of angels and demons. The psychic gifts become more pronounced in his later years. Evidence demonstrates that he was a clairvoyant mind reader and miracle worker. Perhaps the most extraordinary examples of his psychic power are his experience of the stigmata, bilocation, and levitation. Padre Pio's stigmata. According to a 2008 Vatican report, Padre Pio received the wounds of the Passion from the Christ, who asked the Capuchin friar to unite him with his passion. Stigmata are bodily marks and sores resembling the wounds of crucifixion. The report states explicitly that Padre Pio did not ask for the wounds. In fact, he tried to hide them and was uneasy about revealing them when requested to do so. Medical doctors have confirmed the spiritual source of these wounds, which hemorrhaged profusely and caused pain, but did not behave as normal wounds. Unlike normal fissures, the sores did not heal when treated, nor did they become infected or decompose. They did not exude a rotten odor. In fact, witnesses have remarked on the smell of roses that emanated from the wounds. According to Pope John Paul II, the stigmata of the Padre are a sign of an intimate bond between death and resurrection, which characterizes the Paschal mystery. These wounds stayed with the Padre for 50 years and mysteriously vanished just before his death in 1968. The Capuchin friar is also well known for being at different locations at the same time. Witnesses had seen him at the Vatican, the United States, and the Holy Land, even though he had never left the San Giovanni Monastery. In one testimony, Padre Pio revealed that he could travel to the United States in 1 second. In 1919, the Padre was found asleep in his room just before a scheduled rehearsal with a group of children preparing for a Christmas performance. Upon awakening, he was asked, "Where were you?" He simply answered, "I was in America." In 1953, Padre Pio attended a concert in the hall next to the monastery. During the intermission, the Padre fell asleep for several minutes, awakening just before the concert resumed. The next day, family members of an ailing man revealed that the Padre had been at their home in physical person the evening before, tending to the invalid. The time of his bilocation visit coincided with the nap he had during the intermission. Like the testimonies of his gift for bilocation, stories of the Padre's levitation abound. During World War II, the American commanding officer led a squadron of bombardiers to destroy German war materials at the San Giovanni Rotundo situated near the monastery. 2 pilots at the point of triggering the mission saw the Padre floating before them in the air. The bombs that should have destroyed the Rotundo released themselves and fell without serious effect into the woods. Even the airplanes automatically reversed their direction away from the area. The pilots had no manual control of the aircraft. Word spread that Padre Pio's levitation saved the San Giovanni monastery from destruction. In another incident, Padre Asanto testified that he saw the Padre walk above the heads of a group of people lining up before the confessional. When asked about the incident, the Capuchin friar replied, "I can assure you, my child, it's just like walking on the floor." Padre Pio, known as the Miracle Man, has a psychic connection with the spiritual realm. This psychic power can be seen in his experience of the stigmata, incidents of bilocation, and levitation.
Yeah, his cult was really big about 20 years ago. Oh, he was the real deal. He was a magician. There's no doubt about that. There's far too many. Just the amount of reports that are independently, collaborated as well to prove he wasn't a fraud. It was the real thing. Padre Pio was definitely a magician. He had magical and psychic powers. The story of the bomber is even more interesting, isn't that the bomb crew corroborated the story and said, we saw this Italian guy floating in front of the airplane. They didn't even know who he was. So, yeah, there you go. Some people have remarkable powers, and Padre Pio was one of them. Whether you think that's to do with Christianity or God, that's your own personal. My thing is that he could have been a Buddhist and would still have the same powers.
Yeah, and maybe he just had to go, into the cover of the Catholic Church to not be scrutinized and villainized. I had actually never heard of Padre Pio before. About 6 years ago was the first time I heard about him. And one of my earlier spiritual mentors, who she tragically passed away in a house fire. So rest in peace, Yasmina. We still think about you. Her and I were having a conversation one day, and she was also herself very psychically gifted. And she mentioned that Padre Pio was in what she would call spiritual court. And I had never heard of him before. And back then I did a little bit of research into him, and I just didn't find a lot. And so when I was searching throughout the week for stories and Padre Pio popped up, he piqued my interest. And so I read some more about him, and I was happy to find this story because it filled in a lot of blanks. I just didn't know a lot about him. And it was just interesting that, it'd been 6 years since the first time I ever heard his name, and I never heard about him again. And then he popped back up. So yeah, I think he's the real deal.
Oh, no, I'm pretty sure he is too. And I'd be the first to jump on it if he wasn't. And the stories he has about falling asleep and traveling, it reminds me very much of Edgar Cayce's The Sleeping Prophet stories. Edgar Cayce was a Protestant now. And Edgar Cayce, when he would travel to Atlantis and stuff like that, he spoke about it as if he was there and talking the messages back on the phone to whoever was writing it down. The same with his cures. When somebody was sick, he actually went into the body to see it. And so it wasn't like he was looking through their bodies or anything like that. And when he found things, he was floating through as a kind of his consciousness was able to leave his body and go places in space-time. So, I also rate Edgar Cayce very highly as well, because again, the proof is in the pudding. Either it's true or it's not true. And like Padre Pio, you just read the stuff and say, yep, that's it. It's true. You can't deny it. There's too many witnesses.
Right. Yeah. And the stories they're not too outlandish. They're actually kind of simple in what they are. They're fantastic and remarkable, but, supernatural, quote unquote. But when you read about them, it's not this mind blowing thing. If he showed up in a blaze of, glory and fire and the sky opened with, cracked and just bullshit, they're simple stories.
And he never gained from it. Neither the monastery or the parish got rich in his lifetime.
Right.
So
and he's not super well known. I'm not Catholic. I didn't grow up Catholic, so I wouldn't really be the great person to say, but we all know that there's saints out there who are, whether you grew up Catholic or not, we all know about the saints. I'd never heard of him.
Yeah, in Ireland, this cult was really popular among older people about 20 years ago. I remember seeing lots of cars with Padre Pio, like badges in the window. And there was a guy built a house down the road from me, and he called it Padre Pio House. He was an old farmer. So it was about 20 years ago as cult really took off big time for a while. And then I guess that generation died and then it was kind of lost again. But he's definitely, I mean, he's all right in my book. And the fact that he never gained in any way from it makes me like him.
Yeah, he's not like a lot of these kind of evangelical gurus who come along who, like Timothy was saying, they've got these stories that come along with them, and then they end up kind of being these psychic vampire types with really bad raps going around with them. But yeah, the first time I'd heard of Padre Pio was from my first girlfriend, Debbie, back in, it was about 20 years ago. It was like 2001, that time frame. And she's Catholic. And I think her folks were both kind of like pagan, the old school, Wiccans from the 1970s kind of era. So they kind of had that inclination towards them, and they were Catholic too. But I remember her talking about Padre Pio. It just went over my head too, because I wasn't raised with Christianity or anything like that. So the saints weren't really anything I paid any attention to until I started hearing you, Thomas, talk about kind of paganism and the link between it and Catholicism, the way that the saints and the different kind of gods work. And I think it is fascinating that there are these people that have come along with actual magical ability. And like Timothy was saying, sometimes they probably have to hide underneath the cover of Christianity so that they're not persecuted or anything like that. But the thing about the stigmata, it makes me wonder too, if he was able to kind of project that image into people's minds, because people said it didn't smell like rotten flesh. So it wasn't like a fissure or an open wound or anyway. And it actually smelled like roses. So it makes me wonder if that was just something he was able to project into people's mind's eyes, to be able to see the stigmata. And like it was said, they weren't seen frequently. So it's like if he had to actually show his palms to someone, he might be able to project that the way like really good stage magicians are able to project even onto camera illusions that aren't actually in the physical universe occurring, the way that something like the way a normal wound would manifest itself and have it would heal, or it would rot and it would go gangrenous, or it would just seal up with normal healing. But I would imagine that could be one of those things, just the way he projected himself in front of those bombers, or the way he was able to bilocate, or the way he was able to astral project himself, levitate, all that. Those could also be ways of, I'm sure he could project his image into people's minds, and he could project, he could probably create other illusions to project into people's minds. And I'm sure that was just the surface level extent of what the magician was able to do himself.
The first time I didn't hear about him until I was like well in my teens. I was working in this place, and a woman that used to work there, she was very religious, and not in a bad way, just in a nice way. And she used to go to this Catholic order of nuns called the Poor Clares. The Poor Clares are nuns that once they enter the convent, you're there for life. And you don't even talk to another human being. You kind of contact them, you speak through a hatch. And they totally devote their lives to God. It's actually quite amazing in its own way. But one of the things that the Poor Clares do is they bless, you don't see them much anymore, mass cards. And they're usually cards with pictures of saints on them. And the mafia highly value these saint cards for their magical charge. But my mother was in hospital at the time, having an operation. And so she went to the Poor Clares. This kind of lady she was, like a really kind person. And she got her a mass card, and it was Padre Pio, and it was painted like a Goya painting. It was beautiful, the way the painting on the mass card was a colored mass card. And she goes, that's been blessed by the Poor Clares, so it has extra power. And so that was the first time I ever heard of him. And so it's only in the recent 20 or 30 years that his name has really started taking off. Yeah.
Those mass cards are the same ones you're talking about, that the La Costa Nostra, that they do.
Oh, yeah, that's the ones. Yep. That's the only place in the world I still think they're popular is in Italy. You can still see the churches selling mass cards in southern Italy, and and they get the similar orders. These nuns that have locked away, the Italian version of the Poor Clares, and apparently they're the most powerful mass cards of them all because the nuns are completely pure of any outside interference.
That's real interesting too, about that kind of hermitage idea of kind of societal isolation like that, and how that can build a magical charge where they're not getting psychically connected with anything from the outside world that could take them away from being able to focus their willpower. There's got to be
Well,
something powerful in that.
I've seen TV interviews with girls in Ireland, well, they're women now, back who had joined the Poor Clares when they came out of school. They felt they had this religious calling, whatever. And none of them spoke bad about it. Like when they just said one day I decided I had to leave because it didn't do it for me anymore. And she left. But she said she had no bad experience. She said it was a beautiful. She said the experience was like served her well for the rest of her life. She realized how much you can have with so little and be contented. So that's why I don't have any problem with these people joining. I've actually more respect for someone who would join an order like that than someone who claims to be religious and isn't really.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I've had I like I was saying, I wasn't raised Christian in any of that way, so I've never had much exposure to it. But just listening to the way you talk about Catholicism, it does seem like kind of a cool. Not like I'm interested in it, but I like the way that you speak about it, and it makes sense with some of the Catholic kids that I grew up with. Kind of like, okay, I've a little bit better understanding of it.
Yeah, I mean, the Poor Clares have directly come from the Vestal Virgins in pagan Rome in the Temple of Jupiter, so it's a direct link back to our pagan ancestry in Rome. And so that's why Catholicism is basically paganism in its purest form, just with a bit of Jesus at it.
Yeah, I'd be real curious to take a trip down into Mexico, Central America, and see kind of the way that they firsthand do their Catholicism. I mean, like in Southern California, you can see a lot of it, and even just here on the West Coast, you can go to the carnicerias and see the I don't know what they're called, the saint candles, but just kind of 7-day candles and all their altars, whatever they're called. I'm sure there's a term for it besides altar, ofrendas. But just to see that kind of firsthand down in Mexico would be really cool to go into to get invited to some people.
You just remind me of something. I read recently about the atrocities against Catholic clergy that happened in the Spanish Civil War, 1930s. And because I was studying up on this group called the International Brigade, who were supposed to be all these heroes. And it turns out they were basically all a stainless death squad. That's reminded me of that was what was going on in the Ukraine. And among the things that, they did horrible things, like they would get priests to renounce Jesus and then shoot him in front of a pope in front of his clergy. They would rape nuns and kill them and things like that. But one of the things they did was a mock. They got all this village where a miracle had happened. They all got the villagers out. The communists got all the villagers out, and they had a mock execution of Jesus Christ. You can look this up, and there's actually photographs of it. And they got a statue of Jesus Christ out of the church and put it up against a wall and shot it with a firing squad and forced the villagers to watch. So you tell me that's not black magic, or that's not, even the commies who claim to be godless were doing their own dark magic rituals during the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. That's doing that to somebody. Yeah, even if that's not your flavor of spirituality, to someone that's near and dear to them, to families and everything.
Force them at gunpoint.
That's trauma-based mind control, as they would call it.
If somebody in the comments Google that, you'll find a photograph. Spanish Civil War mock execution of Jesus. You'll find the photos. They're just so demented, these people are,
Yeah,
and they claim to be like bringing reason to Spain.
Yeah. Yeah, the things that people can do to traumatize others, that's real terrorism there, and that's
in the head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Giant mysterious magnetic waves emanate from the Earth's core every 7 years. It's not very quiet inside the Earth. Deep below the surface, the planet is literally thundering with activity, from plate tectonics to convection currents that circulate through hot magma fluids. Now, scientists studying Earth satellite data have identified something inside the Earth that we have not ever seen before. A new type of magnetic wave that sweeps around the surface of our planet's core every 7 years. This discovery can give an idea of how the Earth's magnetic field is generated and will allow us to understand the evolution of our planet. That is, the gradual cooling of the planetary interior. The team's research has been published in PNAS. Geophysicists have long theorized about the existence of such waves, but it was believed that they occur on much longer timescales than our studies have shown, says Nicholas Gillette, a geophysicist from the University of Grenoble Alps. Measurements of the magnetic field from instruments based on the Earth's surface indicated that there was some kind of wave action, but we needed the global coverage offered by measurements from space to show what was actually happening. The Earth's magnetic field has long been a subject of interest to scientists. Research to date shows that an invisible structure forms a protective bubble around our planet, trapping harmful radiation and atmosphere. But the magnetic field is not static. It fluctuates in strength, size, and shape and has features we don't understand and gradually weakens over time. The European Space Agency Swarm orbiting satellites are 3 identical probes launched in 2013 that orbit the Earth to study activity inside the Earth. It was in this data that Gillette and his team found strange new waves. They then looked at data from other ground-based and space-based observatories collected between 1999 and 2021 and found a pattern. These waves, known as magneto-Coriolis waves, are huge magnetic columns aligned along the Earth's axis of rotation, strongest at the equator. This fascinating finding opens a new window into a world we can never see. The mysterious wave oscillates every 7 years and propagates westward at up to 1,500 kilometers a year. Their existence suggests that there may be other magneto-Coriolis waves with different oscillation periods that we cannot detect today due to lack of data. For now, as the waves carry information about the medium they travel through, the new discovery could be used to explore the Earth's interior in new ways, including the core, which is still extremely hard to study.
I think it's interesting that this is another 7-year cycle kind of thing, that seems to correspond with people's natural, if it's a circadian rhythm thing with their body, or if it's a psycho-spiritual thing. Astrological as well. Yeah. With, is it Saturn returns that are every 7 or is it 28 years? 21. I don't know. 7. Thank you. But these correspondences with that number 7 again in 7 years. So I just find that fascinating that if the magnetic field does that, how that aligns with people, and if people can kind of synchronize their own kind of rhythm to that geomagnetic thing. Because I think with a lot of the technology-based mind control that was experimented with in the early mid 20th century, they used a lot of tremendous magnetism, like what they did with the was it the Philadelphia experiment with the destroyer off the coast of was that the Eldridge? Yeah. That was in the 1950s that they did that, but with those big yep, and that it rendered it invisible, and whether that was done to people psychically or that was actually rendered invisible. It's just interesting that with that and with some of the MK Ultra kind of stuff, that magnetism plays a role in it. So they're talking about this magnetic field of the Earth fluctuating in the same way. Yeah, and those guys, like Timothy was just saying, they came back fused to the hull of the ship. So tying this into where I was going with this, I'm bringing a lot of ideas together. But when Thomas, you've spoken about the psychic consequences of space travel, I wonder if there's something that occurs to a person after they pass through. Is it the Van Allen belt? That's the farthest part of the magnetosphere of the Earth. Is that right? So I wonder if that's
where all the radiation from the sun accumulates.
Yeah,
that doesn't reach Earth.
Right. So if that's kind of the event horizon, that if we've got a psychic tether to the Earth, if we kind of have to stay corporeally, at least, within that protection of the Van Allen belt. I wonder if there's something about that, and then going out past it. So like going to the moon, or going to the moon and beyond, if that's when some of these people start to have these terrible psychic breakdowns, because that tether, that earthing, so to speak, that grounding, earthing as you guys would call it over here, grounding as we'd call it over here, gets a little bit distorted. So that would make sense, like, why a lot of astronauts have to be really, besides being very physically sound, they've got to be kind of really psychologically sound beings. So just not just any random person can become an astronaut. You've got to have tremendous psychic and mental discipline, I would imagine, to be able to deal with that unearthing once you go past the Van Allen belt and start heading out and having the kind of hallucinations and things that these people were experiencing, these psychospiritual experiences. Same kind of thing that happens when you take just somebody off the street and you give them ayahuasca, or you take, someone who's got a little bit of magical prowess and give them ayahuasca, or any kind of psychoactive substance like that, the person right off the street will probably have a terrible experience with it, but someone who's a little bit more spiritually mature would have a different experience from them and would take something else away from it. So it's just, again, I just think it's interesting that the kind of psycho-spiritual effects that the Earth's magnetic field and all magnetic fields have on human beings and the nervous system.
You brought up a very good point there, that I put a synchronicity when you said that you think that the magnetosphere could be like the psychic threshold of the planet for human beings traveling into space. I was rereading Philip S. Callahan's book, Nature, Silent Music, and he theorizes he was an American service, he was an engineer, scientist who was stuck in Ireland during World War II. Basically, after he invented the communication system for the D-Day landings. When the D-Day landings happened, he was basically stuck in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, with nothing to do. So he had all this equipment. So him and his friends were interested in the megaliths and the round towers. So they started using all this like state-of-the-art equipment from 1944, 45 that was never been used on megaliths before. And he was one of the first U.S. servicemen to travel south in the full uniform without being arrested, because the war was nearly ending. It's some funny stories, like he was the first. They went to the cinema in Dublin in full uniform, and the police wouldn't arrest them. They should have before that, because they were in foreign troops basically. But they were going around Ireland looking at the megaliths, and one of the things they discovered was, especially with the round towers, is they create a thing called diamagnetic energy. And diamagnetic energy is when the field of magnetism is in the reverse of the prevailing field. So if there's a standing stone and it's running north-south, it will generate diamagnetic energy to be south-north. Now, when you said that, now I'm thinking how much of that was to alter consciousness as a kind of is this why we get these unusual feelings at these places? Are they actually magnetically changing the structure of our brains? And you might well have made a discovery there inadvertently there, Jason. But yeah, now you've got me really thinking. The Callahan's theory was that the reason for the round towers is that they would improve the soil with the diamagnetic energy. And that's true. That's absolutely true. And because farmers will tell you they'll always have the cows and sheep always want to eat the grass around the round towers. And they will actually just run in Lough Erne on an island in the middle of the lake, and the farmers actually swim their cows over to eat the grass there, Dervish Island. And the cows want to swim over to eat the grass from around the round tower. And apparently they grow healthier and their milk yields are higher and everything. So but I think now you've got me thinking that it changes consciousness as well. Now I think you've opened an interesting kettle of worms there, Jason, with that comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't take credit for the one to originate that, but it's something I'm riffing off of from another engineer who was a intelligence officer in the military in the middle of the 20th century. And there's a lot of people that were doing that research within that group of folks, both within the Naval Intelligence Corps and the Army Intelligence Corps, experimenting with these things and that idea of there being a kind of a threshold there. And so again, the part of it that's on the macrocosm and the part of it that's on the microcosm. So it is research that I would like to tap into a little bit. And it's what I would venture to say too, is I wonder if these spots where the megaliths are, and I've said this before, I wonder if those are placed on top of something that already existed, that has been extant for eons. And we've been placing these things, stones, buildings, structures, of the highest technology of our era. So if there was a stone Masonic civilization that their highest technology was to set things in stone, they would build a stone structure on it. Somebody who built with concrete and rebar would build something on top of it with concrete and rebar. If someone's technology is mud and straw, they would build something on it with mud and straw, but marking this. So it's like the shamans and the shamanistic types of those cultures would, they would be sensitive to these things. Like,
we're back to Atlantis again.
Yeah. And they were
Atlantean technology, the use of magnetism.
Yep, the wise women, the wise men of the tribe would be aware of these things. But hey, you need to put a marker, or we need to put a marker on one of these things, and make it special. Yeah, and I think that there's
and it's been scientifically validated because the New Science magazine in 1982 did a feature on the roll-white stones in England, and showed that they spiral energy into a vortex and vanish out of reality in the center, as well as they seem to create a barrier that throws energy off into different directions on purpose. Like if they actually use these stones to tune the energy.
right. Yeah, use because there's so much quartz in them, right? And there's quartz again.
Some of them, not all of them. A lot of them don't have quartz too, but generally they tend. In the Irish ones anyway, you always seem to find quartz seams, and we know that quartz it picks up radio signals and transmits radio signals.
Right, and done a little bit of research to find some of these geomagnetic anomalies. And there was a place we visited last summer that had one of these naturally occurring geomagnetic anomalies, and there's enough strange psychical phenomena that occurred at this guy's house. So it's something to take note of, that these things do have an effect on the psyche somehow, whether or not there's an ancient structure there that's been removed, or that they've never been, nobody ever put anything there, or a cataclysm moved the standing stones, or the ruins of a temple that was once built there. A cataclysm could have totally wiped that thing out, and there could still be that standing wave of energy there extant from before that thing was marked off. And
this might be why they didn't go through the Van Allen belts since the Apollo missions. See, the biggest thing with the Van Allen belts was that it was like walking in a room with a microwave on full all the time and the door open. And they didn't know if those guys, they knew they'd survive going through the belts, but the risk of cancer was extremely high. This is why they were military men. They were ordered to fly through the amount. And that's why civilian ones could sue NASA if they got cancer. But now I'm not thinking it's probably not the cancer at all. Perhaps on the other side of the Van Allen belt, they entered it into a diamagnetic state permanently. And that's probably what made them all messed up.
Yeah, and take this one step even further. Imagine going through that Van Allen belt, passing that event horizon, and then it doing something in your mind very similar to the prisoner cinema with the phosphenes and everything. Yeah. That's been said that something like that occurs, where there's the kind of different archetypal symbols that are there within people, whether you want them to be there or not. They're just there. So going through that and kind of them that action onto the body, triggering something like the prisoner cinema effect onto someone. So yeah, those people were going through all the centrifugal tests to see how much G-force they could handle, but they also needed to be really, really mentally, emotionally sound human beings. So that's why all those guys, were high-ranking officers. These weren't enlisted men. These were officers who'd been through a lot of training, and a lot of them were Freemasons too. And so it's real. It's just real.
Which means nothing except that they ran NASA.
Yeah, or I was just thinking that I want to say at some point the Freemasons, they did have. I mean, they're spiritually minded people. They're or cult-minded people is what I'm saying. Yeah, at least I don't know. I don't know if the higher ones are.
A lot of them are U.S. Navy pilots, and the U.S. Navy and the Scottish Rite Freemasonry. The officer class of the U.S. Navy and the Scottish Rite Freemasonry are almost inseparable.
Yeah, I was just saying that there's a bit of a cult-minded. They would have had training, and they would have been aware of things on an occult level, as opposed to someone who's just like an atheist or a normie.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
There's speaking of the Freemasons, I know we're going off a tangent here, quick one. The Argentinian Navy was founded by an Irish Freemason, and he came from Foxford in County Mayo, not far from here. And where he grew up, the street is called Providence Street. On one end is a statue of a goat for no reason. Nobody understands why it's there. And then at the other end is a building with the all-seeing eye on it. So, they do have their secret language. They absolutely do. And their codes. And I think his name is Humbert. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I can't remember the name of him. But the guy he was an Irish guy, founded the Argentinian Navy. He's one of Argentina's main heroes. Major Freemason. So naval services and Freemasonry seem to be very, very strongly connected.
Yeah, like I was saying last week about the idea that the field of psychicism being more of the auspices, or of the having to do with water, that it would be naval intelligence that would be in the field of the mind, where like army intel or it's a little bit different thing. They might have more control over the body, so to speak, when we talk about medical stuff. But no, it is really interesting. And in my opinion, I don't know very much about Freemasonry, but I would imagine in eras past, there was a different Freemasonry or Freemasonic order or lodge, whatever.
There was.
We've talked about this. Yeah.
There was Albert, what's his name? Adam Weishaupt.
Oh, Weishaupt. Yeah.
Destroyed the Grand Orient in Paris. Yep. He basically was a salesman who bamboozled them with all these ideas. But in Lewis Spence's occult history of the world, he writes very eloquently on what happened. And he says basically Freemasonry was destroyed by Weishaupt and the Bavarian Illuminati. And by the time they'd figured out that he was a gangster, basically, that was steering Freemasonry off somewhere else, Lewis Spence said, this book was written in 1890. He said, by then the damage had been done.
Yep. That's real similar to what an author who goes by the pen name Howard H.W. Percival, I think Howard Percival, wrote something to that extent. I think it was published in a book called Thinking and Destiny. I want to think was published around 1907, maybe by 1913. But he says something very similar about the lodge being infiltrated by somebody else sometime in the mid-late 1800s, and that
Illuminati,
in fact,
George
the Bavarian
Washington,
Illuminati,
and George Washington was unhappy about Masonic lodges in the US because he thought they were infiltrated by British spies.
Yep.
And he wanted the Illuminati to infiltrate and wreck Freemasonry in America in order so that these British spies couldn't do any damage. So it's very interesting stuff. There was wars within Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Wars, Lewis Spence is somebody you all need to read up on, guys. He wrote 5 books on Atlantis. He was a Scottish journalist. He wrote 5 books on Atlantis, and he was the secretary of the Society for Irish and Scottish Antiquities, Scottish journalist, and his Encyclopedia of the Occult everyone should have it in their home. It's a must. It's a must. I've got a copy from the 1960s, but everyone should have that in their home. But he has 5 books on Atlantis are fascinating too. A very interesting man, Lewis Spence.
All right, I'm going to add that.
Oh, and he also wrote The Occult History of the Third Reich in 1939. He was wise to them before they even went on the march.
All right. Okay. I'm definitely going to check him out now. That sounds really cool. I was going to say one last. So you were saying that, was it George Washington who wanted the Illuminati to infiltrate the Freemasons?
There's a letter that they found of Washington, and it said something like, now, it's greatly been rumored that this young nation has been infiltrated by the Bavarian Illuminati, and no one more than me would be delighted if that was true. And then I read further down, there's a book I read years ago. The quote is true. That's what he said, or very similar. And then he said, they went on the phrase that why Washington said this was because the new country. You didn't know who was on the British side. It still went on for years. Wars don't just end like that. I mean, they came back in 1812 and burned down the White House and captured Washington, the British, and New Orleans, I think. But he said, no one more than me would be happy if the Bavarian Illuminati is in our new country, because he saw it as a way of wrecking the lodges, because the lodges were full of British spies. That's the theory anyway.
Okay, well, kind of sink the ship before it can be commandeered, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or just wreck it. So at least I don't know, but he did express joy that the Illuminati was in America.
Real interesting. Yeah, there's so much of that I feel like I've got not to sound too woo woo, but I've got some kind of past incarnation connection to. And it all really fascinates me. The architecture and everything in Washington, D.C. really switches me on when I go there. There's so much naughty buildings. Not in that way.
Especially that big pointy thing, big long thing. Yeah.
Yep.
No, what's it going to say? Washington was a very clever man. he was under tremendous pressure to keep, as with the rest of them, to keep a new nation going. And therefore, studying those guys alone and how they reacted through Freemasonry and stuff like that is Thomas Paine, especially. We're really going off topic here, but Thomas Paine, the guy who invented the term the United States of America, wrote a very interesting book on the history of Freemasonry, which is nearly impossible to get. And he said that the Freemasons came from the Druids of Ireland, Britain, and Italy. So there you go.
Yeah, I think Percival says something very similar to that in Thinking and Destiny. It's a great book. It's a big old read, about 1,000 pages long. I read that when I was in the military, and it's an excellent book. And it's got a whole thing called something like the secret language of the Freemasons or something. So it's got like a whole thing about how to read Masonic symbols, and it talks about the ages of.
If there's one country on this earth that's a Freemasonic nation, probably after France, probably France is number one. It's the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's not totally off topic because today is Memorial Day. So we could talk about kind of the occult aspects of the United States on Memorial Day. It makes sense too. But that's fascinating what you said about George Washington about that. I hadn't heard that before, but it's something I do want to learn more about. I would love to go to DC and make a film about that someday once I've done a little bit more studying on this stuff, because I don't know enough about it to be able to have a perspective to speak on from it. But that's one that's on my bucket list, is to make a film about Washington, DC, and kind of the occult history of the United States. I'd love to do something like that.
We can go to the place in Georgetown where they filmed The Exorcist.
Yeah. Yeah. So again,
I've never been myself either. I believe that it's a really nice place to visit and really interesting as well. I know it's got some bad neighborhoods too, but the actual city itself is supposed to have really good restaurants and everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, excellent food there in DC. Yeah. But Kimberly's going there to DC next week. We'll say hi to DC for me, Kimberly. That'll be awesome.
Are you ready for it? I'm ready for it. Psychic weather time.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Well, hello everybody. The psychic weather for this week, the last week in May, is pretty bloody interesting. It's probably the most appropriate psychic weather. Well, it starts out as being for this show. Just about everyone I know had paranormal events in the last week. Very commonly reported shadow people or shadow beings. People were telling me that they would wake up in the night and a black circle was floating above them or in the room, and they felt like it was consuming them. There's been massive UFO sightings around this part of the country, and including a friend of mine who's a former British Army, and she's had UFO experiences before, so she knows what she's talking about. She knows the difference between a star, a satellite, and a UFO. When she was out camping, saw a zigzagging of a light in the sky that made no sense. And then there was weird climatic and weather phenomena directly connected to it afterwards, after she stopped thinking about it or something. And then that was going to be the psychic weather for this week. And also, any of you out there, either in the comments, if you've had paranormal experiences this week, please tell me, because this is usually very, very significant of oncoming changes. It seems to me that, before I get to the next second part, think of reality as two cogs, right? And the teeth and the gears gripping each other. Well, I know anyone's ever messed around with gears, sometimes the gear slips and then it tries to recatch on and it gets back onto then it locks again. It's, the gear might slip. Well, that seems to be what's happened to reality, that this one part has gone out of phase with the other. And remember, like last week's psychic weather report, I said magic is more accessible. Well, this 14 paranormal supernatural experiences that people have been having and telling me about in the last week, and I would say nearly everyone I know personally has had them, that seems to be part of the continuum of that, the magic thing, from magic being accessible last week. Now, that was going to be the psychic weather report until tonight, until starting on Saturday night and right through to now, the Renfielding has been off the feckin' scale. Now, if you don't, people ask me about Renfielding. I'm always explaining it, so please pay attention. It's simple. There's a character in the Dracula novel called Renfield. He's a madman who lives in a psychiatric hospital in England. But before Count Dracula is coming to England to prey on women and stuff like that, to drink people's blood or whatever, bring his cult to England, Renfield, because he's insane, is able to communicate with psychically with Count Dracula. So the archetype of Renfield is an unstable person who's aware of major events to come in society before it happens, and they Renfield. By Renfield, I mean they go absolutely nuts. So you might see this dysfunctional, psychotic mass hysteria on the internet of people going crazy and attacking and going nuts out of blue. That's usually Renfielding. And when you get that coupled with paranormal events, particularly UFO events, which we've had, we in the next couple of weeks could be in for some seriously interesting events in the global field. I'm not saying it's going to happen. This is part of but usually when Renfielding comes, something major is. You see, one of the reasons I knew that Clinton was going to lose the election in 2016, because the week before it happened, the Renfielding was off the scale on the internet. And then the Renfielding was all through Trump's presidency, was constantly flaring up and exploding. It became like the United States of Renfield over there at one point. And now it's happening again. And I'm not trying to make light of anything, but there's been a lot of high-profile mass murders and shootings lately, and not just the one in Texas. They've been all over the world, and there's been a lot of serious crime flare-ups. I'm expecting that probably in the next couple of weeks, maybe even next time we get back to the week of Strange next week, that maybe a major event will happen in the world. It could be natural, it could be political, it could be anything, but I've never, ever come across a wild, hysterical outbreak of Renfielding coupled with supernatural commonalities to all many different people at the same time. It's like this like the sane and okay. Here's the way I'll phrase it: the sane and healthy people are having supernatural experiences and tremendous synchronicities. The whack jobs are Renfielding. Either way, this is something we should be looking out for, and that's the weekends. So it's a psychic weather warning of sorts this week. That's it.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
We'll go in and make a separate video clip of you explaining what Renfielding is, and we'll just have that as a separate little clip. That way, when people need to look that up, they can just go see that, because that was a really good explanation.
Yeah, and pop in pictures of Renfield from like old Hammer movies and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great correlation.
I think Tom Waits, the singer, played Renfield.
Tom Waits,
in that beautiful version by Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies.
The one with Gary Oldman. Yeah, he had a fantastic role of Renfield in that. And then the guy who played in the 1960s Hammer movies was fantastic as well. I don't know the actor's name, but he was like a famous British character actor. Yeah,
that Dracula movie is one of my favorites. We'll definitely do that. That's a really good correlation you pointed out there with the supernatural / Renfielding. It's going on for most people, even I know, in regular life. They're kind of reporting these things too, and maybe a little quiet. People don't know how to talk about that stuff always, but yeah, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm wondering with the magnetic stuff that we're just talking about with the Earth's magnetic field, I need to find if there's a website someplace that publishes the current magnetic index of this fluctuation of the magnetic field, and I would be curious to see how it corresponds with the psychic weather. And I've also noticed that there is a correspondence with solar activity, and I would imagine that solar activity, if the magnetosphere is weak, the highly charged particles getting in through the magnetosphere would do a little bit more of a psychic whip up to people if the magnetosphere is weak. So I bet there could be also an outside explanation for we could be able to do a little bit of prediction with the psychic weather if we can see, okay, the Earth's magnetic field is going to be weak and there's a lot of solar flare activity going on. I would imagine those things correlate.
And things I've noticed, like on Saturday afternoon, I think I saw a kick off. There was these bunch of kids behind me, and where I was in the cafe that I was, and they were out playing in the kind of like yard beside it. And they went from being just like regular kids playing to absolutely just little bastards screaming, like, ah! And like really, really rude, like little kids. And they worked 5 minutes earlier. And it was quite insane how the screaming started. On top of that, one of my cats is acting very strange at the moment. He's all wired up and, he's running around not really being himself. He's usually a very laid back, easygoing, cool cat. Now he's all buzzing and wired and running around, all hyped up. So, watch those auguries, everybody. And one more thing I would say is probably play it low profile this week. Don't get into any arguments. If anyone starts shit with you, block them. Ignore them. Just, you can always talk to them later if you have to deal with them in a family or something. But just don't be drawn into anything. Don't make unnecessary trips. And if you have to go to work or get groceries or something, rest of the time, just stay at home, be a bit of a hermit. And, I always find creativity is a good way to deal with this, like a new project or a project you're working on, to like really stick ahead in it. It's a good way of dealing with that but I would say that, there's some funny business coming down, and I don't know what it is. But all the signs of funny business on the way are there.
I've noticed the birds are a little bit more aggressive lately. I've just been kind of paying a lot more attention to them recently, but around here, the birds have just been a little more aggressive than usual for this time of year.
Oh, I've been deafened every morning by the jackdaws and the rooks outside going bananas. Yeah.
Yeah, so stuff to keep an eye on. And yeah, if anybody else is having these strange phenomena that you'd like to share, go ahead, drop them down in the comments here.
Yeah, we also had a situation today where a lunatic in Paris attacked the Mona Lisa, threw paint on it, and
what?
To protest climate change.
Wow.
That makes no sense.
And there's other things, which I'll make a video on my Thomas Sheridan 2 channel tomorrow. Some very peculiar stuff going on about flights and airlines that are really, it's not appropriate for this show, but I'll talk about it tomorrow in my vlog. There's some really bizarre stuff going on around airports right now. So wow. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Is that mostly over there in Europe, or is it here too?
Well, I thought it was just here in Ireland, but it's not. It's actually happening in Holland. It's happening in the United States as well, on the East Coast.
Damn. All right.
100,000 flights were canceled in the USA last weekend.
Yeah, I saw that.
100,000. And all shitty, wishy-washy stories. There's pandemonium and chaos in Irish and Dutch airports right now. And you can't get answers from anybody. Why? I have my own theories, which I'll talk about tomorrow.
All right. Okay. Well, everybody make sure you watch that tomorrow. Okay. What are the Marphalites? The Marphalites, mysterious glowing orbs that appear in the desert outside the West Texas town of Marfa, have mystified people for generations. According to eyewitnesses, the Marphalites appear to be roughly the size of basketballs and are varyingly described as white, blue, yellow, red, or other colors. Reportedly, the Marphalites hover, merge, twinkle, split into two, flicker, float up into the air, or dart quickly across Mitchell Flat, the area east of Marfa where they're most commonly reported. There seems to be no way to predict when the lights will appear. They're seen in various weather conditions, but only a dozen or so nights a year, and nobody knows for sure what they are or if they really even exist. The Native Americans of the area thought the Marphalites were fallen stars. The first mention of the lights comes from 1883, when cowhand Robert Reed Ellison claimed to have seen flickering lights one evening while driving a herd of cattle near Mitchell Flat. He assumed the lights were from Apache campfires. Ellison was told by area settlers that they often saw the lights too, but upon investigation, they found no ashes or other evidence of a campfire. During World War II, pilots from nearby Midland Army Airfield tried to locate the source of the mysterious lights, but were unable to discover anything. Lovers of the paranormal have attributed the Marfa lights to everything from space aliens to the wandering ghosts of Spanish conquistadors. Academics, too, have tried to offer a scientific explanation for the enigmatic lights. A group of physics students from the University of Texas at Dallas concluded that headlights from vehicles on nearby U.S. Highway 67 could explain at least some of the reporting lights. Another possible explanation is the refraction of light caused by layers of air at different temperatures. This optical illusion, sometimes called a superior image or a phantom morgana, often occurs when a layer of calm, warm air rests above a layer of cooler air. A fata morgana is sometimes seen in the ocean, causing a ship to appear to float above the horizon. The temperature gradients needed to produce this optical effect are common in the West Texas desert. Still others speculate that Marfa lights may be caused by the same gases that create the glowing lights associated with swamp gas, phosphine and methane. Under certain conditions, these gases can ignite when they contact oxygen. The glowing phenomenon, sometimes called will-o'-the-wisps or fool's fire, has been observed around the world, especially in marshy areas where the decay of organic matter can create pockets of phosphine and methane. Though the Marfa lights are nowhere near a marsh, there are significant reserves of oil, natural gas, and other petroleum hydrocarbons in the area, which could include methane in quantities capable of producing an effect similar to that created by swamp gas. Retired aerospace engineer James Bunnell chanced upon the Marfa lights while visiting the viewing platform constructed east of Marfa by the Texas State Highway Department. I just got lucky, Bunnell told the Chronicle. The lights are rare, but I got one of the really good displays. Bunnell believes the Marfa lights are the result of the igneous rock under Mitchell Flat that creates a piezoelectric charge, which is electricity produced under pressure by solid matter such as minerals, crystals, or ceramics. Carl Steffen, an engineering professor at Texas State University, has considered Bunnell's hypothesis, but hasn't endorsed it. It may be geological activity that creates electrical activity, but it's all speculation at this point. There are no proven facts. I would like to go see the Marfa lights.
I'll let you go on this one first, Jason.
This reminds me of that dude we had on.
I'm going to say the same thing, the Phoenix Lights chap.
Yeah. And the piezoelectric thing, that these lights tend to occur when there's that layer of quartz and something insulating, and then quartz, and then when the molecules of that quartz get crushed down, there's a charge that gets created. Now, I think that perhaps that's not a source of some sort of bioluminescence or something like this, but it could be some sort of where that occurs. There could be a one or two way portal there that something could come through. And we've talked a lot about entities that occur, that manifest themselves in a way that looks like this. And I'm wondering if that's what these are, if these are some sort of entity coming out of the ground there, or coming out of wherever there's some sort of portal. Because when we had that fellow on who talked about the Phoenix lights and everything, that these are some sort of life form and not a spaceship. I tend to agree with him about this when there's these orbs of light, that they are, we sometimes we talk about the Jinn on this show, that there's something like that.
Yeah. His name is Jeff, I think. Jeff something.
Jeff Woolwine. Thank you. Yep.
That's Jeff Woolwine. Now we'll pin that symposium and the top comment in the YouTube video of this show tonight. I totally down with that. Whether it's an animal, I don't know. There was Prince Philip, who's now dead, the Queen's husband, was asked by a British reporter in the 70s, what do you think of UFOs? And he goes, I'm very interested in UFOs. Prince Philip said, I've been talking to astronauts and everything about them. And he said, I think there's some kind of animal, because they all seem to be alive somehow. They're not more than their machines. Now, these lights thing, this always seems to be associated with mountainous areas. So it's plasma. Now, my friend Kieran up in Keel, which is full of ancient megaliths. It's famous for them, right? On the tops of the mountains. And when I first came up the Sligo many years ago, I visited there with some friends, and I thought I was going back into, 5,000 years ago. I couldn't believe the energy of the place or how remote it felt and everything. That place he shows me photographs of orbs that he takes pictures of. He lives at the bottom of the mountain by there, and he always takes pictures of. He takes me pictures of the mountains, and he says they seem to have an intelligence too. They're not just plasma. The lights seem to react to how you think about them and things like this. That was also a major UFO hotspot in the 1990s, and there's books and everything written about it. Pretty stupid books, to be honest, talking about there was this crashed spaceship and all this crap. They're called the mountains. They're close to a place called the Curlew Mountains in Roscommon, very famous for UFO flaps, and anyway. And so those lights appear too as well. Now, they also appear in a very famous valley in Norway, where you can see them very, very clearly all the time. And having looked at this phenomenon of the lights, the swamp gas one is even misleading. When they're talking about swamp gas, they're talking about will-o'-the-wisp. That's methane that escapes from the bottom of the bog with decayed material. And in some situations, it ignites when it hits the surface. And you get like a kind of a genie of like fire, right? But there's also another one, the light that moves as a ball. And it's not ball lightning. Well, it could be, but it seems to be like plasma, okay? The ones in Norway, the people said you can communicate with them. You feel that they're putting on a show for you. And if you say to them, if you're in your mind, if you go to the left, the thing moves to the left. Go to the right, the thing moves to the right. Go up, go down, go off. And it will do it. It's like cloud busting. And so it's plasma, yes. It's what those guys said, piezoelectric jumps up. That's all true. But that's not the full story. I feel it's some kind of thing that's definitely connected to human consciousness. And whether it's alive or a spirit or even a substance that our minds can interact with, like we can with water, I don't know. But to just say it's a life source caused by certain kinds of rock and leaving at that is only half the story.
Right. And I think,
that guy, Jeff Woolwine, said the same thing as well. It's created by the mountain, but it's more than just a light.
Right. And there seems to be an agenda out there to link together all of it, that it's all UFO phenomena or all UAP phenomena. There's so many things that are lumped together under one category that shouldn't be lumped together, where and this is one of them, the lights in the sky being one thing, and then there's other strange things that people see going across the moon and things. I think they talked about moon pigeons. I think that was one of some of the terminology that was going around in the radio chatter on the Apollo missions. They spoke about moon pigeons, and there's other code words that they were using for seeing things. Yeah, critters. And
Edgar Mitchell said there were critters outside the space window of the Mercury capsule.
Right. So there's all kinds of stuff out there, and it's a big universe, and I think there's a lot to all of it that goes beyond the way that the media has tried to lump it all together into one thing over the last since like kind of when they took the Roswell thing and brought that together with a bunch of other things to discount all of it, to just take all of it and say, no, it's all ridiculous. It's the same, whether it's the Jesuits or the modern Freemasons or anything, to just take it and put it all together and make it non-believable and say that it's all little green men from Mars or something, to take people from looking at any of it at all.
The Roswell event, to me, from my research, was absolutely a false flag.
Right. That was PSYOP, yeah.
Yeah, that was just put stuff planted in the desert because there was a huge trauma in the United States at that time because the Russians had detonated the colossal atomic bomb. And it was a hydrogen bomb. And also Sputnik was up there in the sky. That terrified them as well. And so they could fly over America and bomb them. And they needed a propaganda weapon really, really fast. And Roswell was it. Now, but that doesn't discount the fact that there was many UFOs seen in that part of America prior to when I'm talking about what we're talking about, strange lights behaving strangely. And that was one of the ones that Marjorie Cameron on her way to California had reported to the police. And so I think she is the first person in the USA to actually reported a UFO. Rather than a flying disc or anything like that, she reported this strange event. She probably did it just to like cover herself to say it happened. But yeah, I'm telling you this, that those things, there's something, that's a huge picture. And they're very happy to say it's piezoelectric. I agree. But it also ties in the foundation of religions. Moses and Muhammad both saw bright lights that communicated with them, that gave them their religion. And it's very common. And then you have the Fatima thing. The Fatima thing in Portugal is the most incredible story in the history of probably all paranormal events. And that all started with lights as well, you know? So it's an incredible thing.
Yeah. And then the Roswell thing also taking any credit away from any, discrediting any actual research done into spaceships, not crash spaceships, but if there are other beings, other humans, other whatever non-humans out there flying around, it lumps all of it together into that disinformation campaign and brings all of it together into a big ball of nothing. But there was back to Philip S. Callahan.
He was one of these people who believed in a particle called trachyon. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's an element that many, even scientists, believe, it's theorized heavily, that apparently can slow down, speed up time, and be in different parts of space and the universe at the same moment. And these people believe that if there's ever going to be travel, space travel using some kind of technology, the trachyon or the trachyon, how it's pronounced, will be the means to do it. Now, it's a theorized particle, and I think even Callahan even claimed to have actually recorded and measured it at one time. But so it was almost like there was really interesting space travel ideas going around the 1950s by people who knew their shit, and then suddenly it shut down. And then you have Roswell and little green men. I mean, Jim, that chap Jeff Woolwine was my idea of a perfect UFO researcher. He went out there initially thinking it was aliens, recorded the things, saw them, examined them, looked at all the evidence, eventually said, no, they're not alien spaceships, they're something else. Yep. And that's, if you're an honest UFO researcher, you will come to that same conclusion. And if you're, I always say, anyone who's been studying UFOs for years and are still pushing the alien, and I'm really studying, I'm not just watching Ancient Aliens now and again, but really study the phenomena. If they're still pushing the bullshit of a spacemen inside spaceships, they're either nuts or they're on the payroll.
Yeah. The white lights in the sky are one thing, and then spaceships are another thing. They're two separate categories. It's apples and oranges. Yeah. And with the space travel thing, I wonder too. We talked about black holes 2 or 3 weeks ago, and sometimes I wonder if there is space travel technology, or if there was at one point, or Oumuamua and that kind of thing. If there are, for lack of better terms, kind of like the Stargates from the film and the TV series of these jump points where space is, if you just, for lack of a better term, kind of folded over on itself, and these hole punches of the fabric of reality kind of folded over on itself like that, and then a hole punched through it. If take shortcuts and just be able to go through some of these, and and if there's something like that, that's what black holes are. And if any of those exist on the planet anywhere, if people could just, go back and forth between different places within the universe. And like I've said before, I'm pretty sure there are other human looking just like us out there and other parts of the universe. They might have a little bit less gravity or a little bit more gravity than we do. They might have a little bit different atmospheric composition, but I'd imagine there are other people out there that look just like us or similar enough where you wouldn't notice them if they were here on Earth. But that's what I think of space travel. I don't think that there's any kind of there's no sort of propulsion system that can get you fast enough from besides like between is close enough to here on the moon, 300,000 miles or so.
There isn't enough energy on Earth to do it.
Right. So you'd have to have another way of traveling if you're going to do it corporeally. And then there's all the non-corporeal travel. We talked about the Dogon and people who are able to project. One of the research done back in the mid 20th century about the we were talking about the Van Allen belt earlier, is being able to remote view it, and people when they would project themselves their awareness up into the Van Allen belt and see what happened. People would have strange psychical occurrences too by just projecting their attention to the Van Allen belt and having things. So I'd imagine, space travel, there's many ways to do it. And one of my favorite things to look at is that idea of kind of folding space over on it. And that's what these black holes are. They aren't necessarily collapsed in incredibly dense matter the way that some of the people look at them, but they are some sort of portal.
And cycling back to the previous story, it was the U.S. naval pilots who were given the honor of revealing the UFO footage to the world. So there was a bit of an interesting connection there from a possible Freemasonic side of things. And of course, it was the Tic Tac UFO, which is very common now. That was the first UFO I ever saw. If you go back to one of my channels, you'll see the first and only UFO experience was of what I called at the time a white egg shape, moving slowly across Sligo Bay. And that's the classic Tic Tac shape, which lots of people are now seeing.
And they look like they're here, but they're not. It's like they're in between.
And they also feel like they're alive. They feel like they're looking at an animal. And they're moving too slow to actually stay in the sky. There's nowhere they should fall.
Yeah.
And then it just vanished like that. Right. As soon as I thought to myself, oh shit, that's my first UFO, it vanished.
Yeah. That's what I think. I think there's a tremendous amount of variety of things out there and strange experiences that we're only just starting to look into this stuff now that we're doing independent research on it. When there's no agenda behind the research, there's more possibility of things that can be opened up because we're not trying to push anything from a particular angle. It's much easier to go out there and look and flow attention into one direction and see where that direction goes. And then, okay, if that's not going anywhere, you can back up from that and go down a different path, or pivot the theory a little bit and develop it a little bit. So
yeah, I would like us to have more UFO researchers on the symposium. We had Ben, but we had that guy Jeff. I'd like to have some more that would talk about it in the broader field.
Yeah, we'll start hunting for some.
All right. Inside the real life lab and secret experiments that inspired Stranger Things. Joe Lofrino has worked at the wild, craggy eastern tip of Long Island, now called Camp Hero State Park, for 18 years. He knows the spooky, abandoned military base, which supposedly inspired the Netflix series Stranger Things, better than most. It's a place that's dominated my life and my nightmares, he told the Post. Many locals in Montauk mock the tales about Camp Hero being the site of secret government experiments involving mind control, time travel, wormholes, teleportation, and kids hooked up to wires in hidden underground labs. The rumors took hold in 1992, 11 years after the military base at Camp Hero was shut down. A book called The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time by Preston Nichols told of sinister Nazi-style experiments that meddled genetically and psychologically with kidnapped local kids. Historian Henry Osmers laments how the conspiracy theories have brought in gawkers who ignore the official military history of the area, one that dates to the Revolutionary War, in favor of hunting down aliens. Another local, Paul Fagan, spent 14 years exploring Camp Hero and painstakingly researching government documents at the National Archives in Manhattan. He told the Post that there may be a nuclear reactor secretly buried at the site, installed around 1958 as part of the Cold War era Army nuclear power program. Fagan suspects that the conspiracy theories about Camp Hero may have been planted to deflect from the possible reactor. And then there's Lofrino. The 53-year-old grew up in Montauk and now works as a parks employee at Camp Hero. He also sincerely believes he's one of the lost and tortured Montauk boys popularized in Nichols' book. I didn't believe it until 2 years ago, Lofrino told the Post. I was hypnotized by a certified hypnotist for about 40 minutes, and all these memories flooded back. They did a very bad thing to us out there, and we were just little kids. They had no right to experiment on us. It was a very, very dark and very evil thing. He believes he was abducted and abused during the summer of 1980 and possibly during the summer of 1981 when he was 12 or 13. He recalled under hypnosis that a local boy whom no one knew very well invited him to bike to the base. The first time, Lofrino said, there were two men waiting. Dressed in civilian clothes, they ushered the boys into a sunken house on the base. Later, he said, he and other boys were brought underground through Battery 113, one of the steel gunneries left from World War II. He remembers lying on a table with wires coming out of him like electrodes. They analyzed us like animals. He said there were up to 50 other kids there. He believes some of them were later killed. It would be easy to write him off as a kook, but he is gainfully employed at the park, has a steady girlfriend, and appears to have a solid relationship with his kids, and locals call him a friend. He said that, while under hypnosis, he went to the location he remembered with another parks employee who was also interviewed by the Post. There, they found remnants of the sunken house from his visions. Park Superintendent Tom Dest did not return calls for comment. If we had a backhoe and my boss let me dig in that spot, which I know he won't, I can guarantee we'd find some cement structures down there, Lafrino said. Filmmaker Christopher Garanto grew up near Montauk, made the 2014 documentary Montauk Chronicles that detailed the allegations of three men, Nichols, Al Bielek, and Stuart Swerdlow, who say they were brainwashed and forced against their will to take part in experiments at Camp Hero between 1971 and 1983. In the 1970s and 80s, Nichols led something called the psychotronic movement that claimed government agents used electromagnetic waves to plant thoughts in people's heads. Nichols, who died 2 years ago, claimed he was part of the so-called Montauk Project, but recovered his memories only after the fact. Garantano told the Post he felt that Nichols and the others were not believable, but he went on to explore Camp Hero so doggedly that he employed a geophysicist to analyze the ground beneath the old base. He said they found evidence of large structures not seen on any official maps. Forget all the alien and MK Ultra. Forget all the alien and MK Ultra. I think there was some type of experimentation out there using kids or teenagers, maybe runaways from New York. Once home to an army base during World War II, an Air Force station during the Cold War, Camp Hero was decommissioned in 1981 and is now owned by the state park system. It sits on 755 acres of thick forest and desolate wetlands with spectacular 360-degree views of the Atlantic Ocean and Block Island Sound. Thanks to Nichols' series of books and the success of Stranger Things, Camp Hero has become Long Island's Area 51, an eerie sight straight out of the Twilight Zone. Looming high above it all is the last of the superpowered Cold War-era SAGE radar towers constructed in the event of a Soviet nuclear attack, with the intention of giving us a 30-minute warning. The antenna emitted up to 425 megahertz, which is also the frequency allegedly needed to enter human consciousness. Even locals who decry the secret underground base, stories admit that when the tower was up and running, it interfered with television sets and other electronics, and that many people reported suffering headaches. I don't want to add fuel to the fire because I don't believe all the zombie stuff, said one resident of 40 years. But the impact that tower had on the town was real. I don't know if it affected our thoughts like some people say, but it was a force. The now resting 90-foot tower and 40-foot wide dish is a draw for tourists who come to explore the World War II gunner outposts and spooky boarded up buildings. The army designed the base to look like a fishing village, even though soldiers actually lived there to fool the Nazis. A church that was actually a gym for officers remains, but a series of Cape Cod-style houses have been torn down. After the war, the Air Force took over the site, shutting it down in 1981. At that point, according to Nichols' books and a host of other researchers, bizarre things started happening. I believe it's entirely possible that the human experiment stories are true, said Peter Beauvais, a former Manhattan advertising executive and author of the novel Montauk Time. Scientifically, physiologically, it's all conceivably real. I believe there were army experiments out there that involved interdimensional travel, and the fallout from that still exists, like a tear in the space-time continuum, said Beauvais, who has spent summers in the area since childhood and knows just about everyone in town. Having said that, there's no hard evidence that I've seen to prove it. Nichols' co-writer Vincent Barbaric, who used the pen name Peter Moon, told the Post, "We're dealing with phenomena that is not just 3D. If you research sacred geometry, Montauk is known for being a power vortex. Geologically, it's an underground mountain that comes up. It's its own separate island in a way. Something happened out there, and I'm sure of it." Even Fagan, who avoided researching the conspiracy theories at Camp Hero, said the place draws people in and it takes a toll. So many people, including me, who spent any time looking into Camp Hero ended up completely different people afterwards. It's a strange coincidence, but I've seen it happen to multiple people. I got so squirrely I had to leave town for a while. All I can say is the imagination is one hell of a machine that can affect you to the point where you no longer know what is true and what isn't.
Well, as you know, I lived on Long Island and I've got into the whole paranormal 14 stuff there. That extreme end of Suffolk County and Long Island, where you have Montauk, the Twin Forks, you have Montauk on the southern tip, Yap Yank on the northern tip, and Block Island Sound leading across to New Rhode Island, is a very, very beautiful part of the world. It's an extremely beautiful place. And once you get past the Hamptons, where all like the millionaires and the movie stars and everyone lives, but it still feels very, very remote, much of Suffolk County, even today. And it's part of, even though it's not particularly remote, there's lots of people live out there, and it's in the New York metro area, it still has this weirdness about it. Now, the Montauk thing, it's not just Montauk. There's Brookhaven National Laboratories, and there's Grumman Aerospace. So it's a whole black ops from a huge end of Suffolk County is literally devoted to the black ops, right? And military technology and all kinds of weird shit. So I believe the Montauk thing was real. Who knows what they get up to in Brookhaven National Laboratory. I have suspicions that the original DeFeo murders that took place, that started the Amityville thing, I believe that Ron DeFeo was somehow got to by some kind of MK Ultra type thing out in Brookhaven or somewhere like that. And there was all kinds of weirdness. Remember, we had Heather on one of the symposiums, and she said her parents were there the night that Ron DeFeo killed the whole family, and they didn't hear any sounds of the guns going off, even though he basically used an elephant rifle, which would sound like a bazooka, shooting his family members. There's all kinds of weirdness on that. Now, there was a UFO researcher, and I cannot remember his name, that lived out in Suffolk County. And he was sort of like an amateur Fox Mulder, right? And you would no, and he didn't write any books, but he used to write articles for like local newspapers, and he published a newsletter, that kind of thing. And in any other part of the world, he'd be just considered a harmless eccentric and left alone. But the FBI and the Suffolk County Police and the local government out in the county made his life a living hell. They hit him with every single law, ordinance, fine, harassment you could, and then he vanished. He simply vanished off the face of the earth and was never seen again. Now, I had a friend called Lou. He was an Italian-American chap, and we used to go camping together. And he says that there's something weird shit goes on in Brookhaven. And he goes, and how you'll notice is there's huge, it's supposed to be just a laboratory just for doing experiments. But they get deliveries of chemicals in railroad freight cars and other raw materials at the frequency you would get into a huge industrial plant or chemical works. So, I mean, literally, and you can, if you go on Google Earth, you can look at the freight yard for Brookhaven, and it's full of huge chemical cars. And apparently, they're daily deliveries of massive amounts of chemicals to go where? Into a laboratory. And he told me that there was a story out there. There are vast tunnels underneath Suffolk County connecting Brookhaven, Grumman, and Montauk, and these chemicals are something to do with it. This raw materials, there's something going on underneath Suffolk County on Long Island, and that's what this UFO researcher that they probably eventually murdered was well into. He knew shit was going on, and he was constantly writing letters to have the government arrest scientists who work in Grumman. And this is when he started going after Grumman, is when they started going after him. He went from being a harmless. Now, he did say things like it was alien technology and stuff like that there, but he was really pissing them off. At Brookhaven. He was really, there was also, it just goes on and on, guys. We could stay here all night. There was the very strange flight 777, I think it was, or 800, flight 800, TWA flight 800, that literally dissolved in the skies over Brookhaven National Laboratory in the late 1980s. And the writer, I can't remember his name. I've done a video on this channel about it. Very peculiar. The thing literally melted in the sky. Loads of people said they saw a light flying up from the ground and hitting the plane, and the plane falling out of the sky. That was all called conspiracy theorists and all this crap. That was not far from there. It literally it literally died. The plane died, and the U.S. Navy was doing weird. Here we go again. Was doing weird, high secret maneuvers in Long Island, just on the Atlantic there. And finally, Aleister Crowley's last ever magical operation took place on Montauk Point before he left America to go back to England. At the exact same moment, the H.P. Lovecraft, over Block Island Sound, on the other side of the water in Providence, wrote the first story, Dogon, of his Cthulhu mythos. Now, that alone is just mine. All that stuff that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just my favorite stories from there.
Yeah, keep going with that one. This is real interesting stuff, especially because this gets into, like you're saying, the real UFO research stuff, like the fellow who was killed. It's like you know people when they're actually onto something, they end up being disappeared like this, and all of the official narratives and the official unofficial narratives that float around on YouTube and Ancient Aliens and stuff, all that exists and it's being pushed. But the thing, they still have a show. It's the people that get out there and start talking about things that start having.
And he was just like Jack Bullwine. He started off Brookhaven, they have aliens. And then when he started saying this other weird shit going on down, that's when they started going after him. They were happy when he was just talking about aliens, but when he started talking about other shit, they went from.
Yeah, Thomas, if you have any more information on this, people in the comments over here on Facebook are very fascinated by what you have to say about it. If you have any more stories or anecdotes about this, or people's channels to go look up, if you have anything to drop for us now. Just keep going on about it.
Well, the flight, the TWA Flight 800 video is on BR313. Look down the link. The other stuff, there's a VON called Welcome to the Neighborhood. It's about the DeFeo Amityville comments. It's either on Thomas Sheridan 1 or Thomas Sheridan 2 channel on YouTube, called Welcome to the Neighborhood, VON Amityville. You'll find it, and that I put that on there as well. And the other stuff, maybe we should do a small show about this. You know, we could do like a come back here on camera with you guys, or just my own, maybe, whatever. And we'll record some, we have a free night. But yeah, I found there's the high strangeness in Suffolk County is bizarre. People go on about, and there's all sorts of other part ghosty, spooky stuff as well. There was a family that lived out there that were all dressed in black after one of their children died. And it was like they painted their house black and put a gigantic upside down crucifix. There was all kinds of weird Indian stories and stuff. It is, when they built those labs out there, Grummond is a city. Brookhaven and the Montauk one, what's it called? Echo something? Wasn't it? Timothy just read?
What was it? The question?
It had a name, that laboratory from Stranger Things.
Oh, Camp Hero?
Camp Hero, yeah. But that stuff is all real. That's area out there. And I think that there was something, because those places, there's loads of books you can get, like they're called like Spooky Long Island and, you know, Magic, Haunted Long Island. And I used to have lots of them. Well, I used to read them now and again. Loads of stories of weird Indian shit. The Indians knew that place was weird and strange. But there's that. I mean, it's just like people like like the story of Salem's Lot in Stephen King, where in the film version, David Soul says, "I believe that the Marston House attracted these people because evil places attract evil souls." Now, not saying Crowley was particularly evil, but why did he go to Montauk to do his closing rite of his American operation? You know, at the same moment, all of a sudden, Lovecraft begins to start of what's the beginning of the American pagan cosmic horror revolution. Come on, just across the water.
What year was that in, Thomas? When Crowley was there and Lovecraft were there?
You'll have to look it up. I don't remember. I've got a video again somewhere called Lovecraft Crowley Long Island or somewhere like that. I'll try and dig it up. You'll find it. It's either on BR. It might be on BR313 where it's on Thomas Sheridan too. But yeah, no, I think it's on BR3 with Crowley and Lovecraft in Long Island or something like that. Crowley and Lovecraft. But yeah, Dogon was written at the moment that Crawley was doing his final operation.
Yeah, people are saying they would love for us to do a special about this, so we should get together and do a special report about this sometime. And then we've got someone saying the Week in Stranger Things. I love it. And then Jose says,
I've never seen Stranger Things.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. You would enjoy it. It's a fun show. It's just a whole lot of fun to watch. It's seated, and I think you'd enjoy it, Thomas.
Yeah,
Good
I'm sure
acting,
there's loads of watchers of the show who live on Long Island or in Suffolk County. Light up the fucking comments. We want to hear your stories.
Yep, and you'd like the Dungeons and Dragons aspect of Stranger Things. I think you'd enjoy that. But yeah, Jose says something interesting here about people who have remote viewed Montauk base have seen some pretty interesting experiences. Yeah, I've heard about some of those remote viewing studies too, about people who've projected their awareness into Montauk. But yeah, this is real fascinating stuff, and I'm wondering what Manny Grossman is his name, Grossman, who's over there on Long Island. If
No, he's not. He's on the other side. He's in Westchester County.
Oh, that's right. I keep thinking he's on Long Island. Yeah.
No, he's north. He's north on the Bronx. He's the other. He's miles. He's the other side of New York. Yeah.
Yeah, but if he ever goes over there, that's one area. Again, DC and Long Island. There's a few areas I'd like to go do some research of, and then go over there and do some filmmaking in the future.
Suffolk County area. It's endless suburbia. It's like, well, you grew up in California, at the New York metro region, and then suddenly you come into a strange place. I can't explain it, but there's a high strangeness all around Suffolk County. It's like, am I still in the New York metro region? That's not the vibe about it.
Yeah, real different kind of suburban vibe on the East Coast than the West Coast. The time I've spent stationed over on the East Coast, suburbia is a totally different animal than suburbia of the West Coast. But I get what you're saying though. I've been to the suburban side over there in Hampton Roads, Virginia area too. It's just different kind of thing, different kind of vibe. But yeah, this is very fascinating, and people are definitely loving what you have to say about it, Thomas. So we'll have to get this going sometime and talk about just this subject for a few hours. We'll get all the links together.
But maybe we can find someone who just looks into this stuff out in Long Island, get him on a symposium or her.
Yep. Timothy says she's on it. So,
cool.
Wow.
All right. We made it over the 2-hour mark. What a banger.
Wow, that was a quick 2 hours.
Yeah. Thank you for all that insight there at the end there. That was a great way to wrap this. People are on the edge of their seats. I know I am. And I read those Preston Nichols books years ago, and I was just completely floored. I always felt that, I don't know enough to know if everything he said in there was true, but there was a feeling that I always had reading those books. That was some real shit.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I said, go look on Google Earth, go staring around Brookhaven and Montauk and stuff, and just see what kind of vibe you get.
Real quick on the Brookhaven thing, my son is 7, so he likes Roblox, and there's a game that you can enter in Roblox, and it's called Brookhaven. And it is I play it with him sometimes, and it is a really weird fucking landscape. And it's a building with a bunch of different weird rooms and shit in it. So I'm going to definitely have a little bit of a different perspective next time I play that game with him, and he wants to do Brookhaven. So
I just want to bring up a quick one. I've meant to talk about this on this channel. And Countess Cortana, Cortana, she's knocks around a lot of my stuff for years now. She's a girl in America, and she was involved in game development. And out of the blue, she said to me, "Do you remember when you started in computers a game called Marathon on the Apple?" And I went, to this date, the creepiest game I have ever played.
What is it called?
Marathon. It was on when the Apple LC came out in the early 90s, the first color computer you could buy and have at home. A game was produced called Marathon. And it was basically you on a spaceship trapped with these interdimensional beings in the darkness. And I used to have nightmares about playing that game after I used to play it. It was strangely bizarre. It was like a first shooter Dungeons and Dragons type thing. But to this day, that game has never... It'll go on YouTube and look for Apple Marathon early editions. And the that she was convinced, and she was in Cortana. If you listen to this, thank you. You're right, and I'm convinced too that there was a cult something built into that game.
Yeah, and that's why in the end all this alien stuff is more creepy, because it is more interdimensional than it is anything. Just like the call on Coast to Coast years and years and years ago with the interdimensional thing, that little bit of warning that was dropped, and the guy showed up again to say, "Oh no, it was just me playing around. It wasn't real." That's what made it so strange. But yeah, there's something terribly creepy about the interdimensional stuff. All right.
All right, you guys, thank you all so much for chilling with us for a couple hours. We always love to see your comments. Thomas, thank you. Love you as always. And yeah, we'll put this special together. I'm not sure if it's going to be this week, possibly next. We'll just have to.
It'll be next week because I'm busy this week. It'll be next week.
Okay, so next week. Yeah, awesome, fantastic. You guys all have a great week, and we will see you out there. Bye.
See you. Bye.